determine those cities, and first of all it's the population, then the economic power and potential. Also, it's absolutely clear the GDP of Tokyo is 2% of the world GDP. Many countries of their GDP are smaller than the biggest cities, and thus, the role of the megalopolis in the economic development of the civilization is only growing from year to year. And talking about megalopolis, we need to think about the future. We need to discuss what changes are ahead of us. And it seems very important to harmonize the urban politics with the economic politics. One cannot exist without the other. And these systemic decisions of how the city should look like in terms of infrastructure, population, social sphere, those are very relevant, and we need to think where all those people are going to work to earn their living, to make a profit for their companies, and to form this budget that will allow to realize many of those products. And this perspective needs to be long-term, 20, 30 years ahead, because this horizon of planning is typical for... Could you please turn off this sound, this music? Thank you. It's very typical for this main document of city politics, city policy, I mean the master plan. I suggest that Maxim Reshetnikov makes an introduction speech, and then we will be discussing. Each of us has its own perspective on what the economy of Moscow perspective are and what we should be preparing for, what are the challenges that we are already seeing today, because there are many examples of the cities losing this right track and ending up on the margins. Of course, this is not going to happen to Moscow, but however, we need to pay a lot of attention to think about those problems. Maxim, you have the floor. Thank you so much. My task is very difficult. In 7 minutes, discuss the economy policy of the city of Moscow, and I will try to formulate one thought that will bring together under this term of economic policy, various things that take place in the city: the property tax, subway investments, city festivals, upgrading tariffs for engineering communication networks, and all of those things are united under one aim. Our topic is economic strategy of a megalopolis, the place of the business. But what is this business? Because there are many different kinds of businesses, and we in our economic policy, or when we're discussing it, we face two kinds of economic behavior from the business community. First one is those who invest, who buy objects, who invest and then build and then rent those buildings. I mean this proprietary business. And the second kind is those who inside those projects create employment or commerce or provide services. Both kinds of businesses are very important for the city, but the focus of our economic policy is creating new jobs. And it's clear why, because this is our social function, our responsibility towards the Muscovites, and also because the physical entity's income tax is more than 50% of tax basis of the city, and this share is only growing from year to year. That is why for the city business is extremely important, but it is in the first place the business who knows how to create and use assets, and that is why our task is to use the assets in order for each square meter of the city, each stone would become a job and bring income to Muscovites into the city budget. I also think that we should explain the difference between employment and investments. Not all investments, and you see there is a general tendency here. Not all the investments create jobs. Now the Department of Economy also is responsible for tariff regulations, and with the energetic networks we see that there were many investments for pure investments, that were made on false assumptions and false forecasts of the economy, and that is why the role of usage of the electrical and thermal heat assets are only a little bit more than 50%. We built stations and plants that are underused. We had investment, we had positive forecasts, but now we have to pay and sustain those objects that are underused. That is why our investment and economical policy needs to be focused on employment, on creating new jobs and how those assets are going to function. One question, how do we make assets work? What can the city do about this? And we have a lot of tools for that. The city in itself is a proprietor. It owns a lot of assets. And in this point of view, the city should rather get rid of all the things that are not used for producing social goods and services. In the last year, more than 350 billion rubles worth of assets were sold. Those assets found new owners who will be more efficient, who will restructurize them, shut some of them down, some of them repurpose. And it not only works for major assets like Maeco, banks, etc. It also works for minor assets. Since 2014, there has been an increased growth of small companies that have the right to purchase city assets, and more than 70 billion rubles worth of agreements for small businesses to buy assets. And it also happened during the crisis. You see, the small business knows how to assess the city's perspectives and is ready to invest. How else can the city stimulate the asset management and usage? The assets tend to be used where there are non-zero alternative costs. Well, I mean, where when you don't use the asset, it's gonna cost you money. This is one of the efficient tools that create the income basis for the city, and also makes the owners to use the assets that they have. And how the real estate market reacts, the rent market reacts in 2014-15, we see that the speed of reaction of the market to the change of the balance of demand and supply, we see a reaction. And some of it we attribute to the fact that it's very expensive to hold, to own objects that are not used to their full capacity. We have the property tax. We also need to work on the clarification on national inventory land registry. And here the parameters are not specified, but we are working together with the business. Another topic is to introduce sensible rules in construction, joining the energetic networks. And our policy is that everyone should pay not more than it's worth. I mean to get switched in to the electric grid. That was what I meant. Here, the assessment of the price should be fair. I mean, the price of construction in the city, and also the investment into upgrading and infrastructure. This is the work on capitalizing the assets. We should take care of those assets to be expensive, because the city where they are is attractive. In this sense, all of our efforts in terms of city fairs, city festivals, and all our efforts to in terms of provision of urban amenities, they are relevant and they're efficient. What I'm talking about right now To changing those approaches is the foundation of our economic policy. We can discuss the structure of economy, of post-industrial economy, non-post-industrial economy, but the real character of the economy is rather determined by the mechanisms and stimuli and motives that within the economic development we do create and the environment that is being created. And from this perspective, Moscow in the last 5 years has done a great job in rebuilding the tools of the city development, and those tools will provide our prosperity in the 21st century. Thank you. Well, now I think we should go counterclockwise, not in alphabetical order. In this direction, Alexei Shapochnikov, chair of the president of the Moscow City Duma. How do you see the future Moscow?
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We as deputies have to be prepared. We represent Moscow City Duma. My colleague here is also representing the Chamber of Commerce. I would like to tell you a couple of words about our City Duma relation to the economy of Moscow. This city is still the center of the attraction for investment, despite everything that is happening in the world. One of the most important is the, cutting of the tax burden. This is the work that we've been doing since 2014, and the key idea here is to give enterprises and organizations some free money that can be invested in the development. And the fact that the investor will not get any profit from that, we're not really afraid of that fact, because we understand that the development will bring some profit, but in some other form, finally. Since 2014 till 2016, 11 laws were adopted related to certain degrees of tax benefits. I will not tell you about all of them, only about the most important. In 2015, we adopted a law, a set of anti-crisis law dedicated to the development of business. Two of them are especially important because these are setting new rules of the game and new ways of dealing with business in Moscow. These are setting the new approaches to development of business in the capital. Right now, the city is structurally remaking the economy, not partially, but structurally. The first law dedicated to that is the investment policy law and the law on the state support of the subjects of the investment activities. I think that it's very important that Moscow legislation for today guarantees the support measures for the investment projects. And not just any investment projects, but the ones that seem to be priority for the main spheres for the city economy. This is green production, IT, clean technologies. This is basically the whole structural remaking. Domestic and foreign investors who fulfill all of the requirements receive the guarantees that protect them from non-commercial risks. This is the first time we do that in the capital. We create a unique precedent when, for example, because of the administration or because something the administration did or didn't do, the investor suffers some losses. The investor has the right for the compensation from the city. This is the real measure that is there for every investor. It is not. It's only in Moscow. It doesn't exist anywhere else. I'm trying to be quicker. Second law about the industrial policy of the city of Moscow. Obviously, the previous law is morally, outdated, and we need a new one, and it was adopted. Despite the fact that the legal stimulation the tax stimulation is usually the key support measure for the investment entrepreneurship, Moscow also uses another one, is R&D support. Within this program, government sets a very ambitious goal of increase the share of small and medium business in the industrial production. I will not tell you the number of technoparks and technopolises. Everyone is aware of that. I want you to know that in the city, a constant monitoring of, the entrepreneurship environment is happening, and well, according with the results of that monitoring, we are making our decisions. The last decision that we had to make was related to land plots with some sports objects that are under construction or that were recently constructed. And about the objects themselves, there were really huge, substantial tax benefits for these land plots, and also recently the laws dedicated to tax benefits were adopted in relation to social objects like hotels, for example, medical objects as well. We are always trying to improve the legislation system, and well, it's also about patents. The number of patents that we receive every year is growing, and well, for small and medium business, this system works quite well. Alexei, yes, thank you. It's quite clear that the legislative framework is a substantial one. It's quite a good one, and there is a good practice. But I still would like to see the future. Vladimir Platonov, please. The future is amazing. I'm not here as a deputy, but also as a president of the Chamber of Commerce. I would like to tell you a couple of examples of laws adopted, because those are very important. You remember how for many decades the private taxi drivers, not registered anywhere, were a serious problem. And right now we had additional hundreds of thousands of drivers that are not only contributing to the budget but also providing the citizens and guests of the city with a very high quality service. So for the Chamber of Commerce, the main priority is to participate in the development and the realization of state measures of support for given to the small and medium businesses. 37 committees or groups of Chamber of Commerce are cooperating with the relevant committees, with the different communities. We promote this cooperation. We organize meetings. We share our experience and tell about our work. But the most important for us is the feedback. It's monitoring of the legislation and amendments to the legislation. Not a single law that was adopted that was applied into Moscow's City Duma never avoided, analysis by the Chamber of Commerce, and we actively participate in its approbation. Another thing is our integration into the system of the support of small and medium businesses, as we are participating as a consulting party. We're not only telling them, we're not only giving them instruction. We go. We go with them all the way. We give them consultation. Just a couple of weeks before, we had, a call from a couple of organizations. We cooperate with VTB Bank, with Alpha Bank, with many other substantial organizations. And on the basis of our chamber, we see the real system of the support of the beginning entrepreneurs. The Chamber of Commerce turns 25 years this year. We have a vast experience. We have very experienced people who are really willing to help youngsters to, start working in this areas of business. These are the main directions, the main successes that make us quite optimistic about the further development of the city. Thank you. Marina Karateva, Vice Director General of the Agency of Strategic Initiatives. Yes, we have a certain focus there. Quite often when talking with the governor, we hear the question what the strategy starts with. Well, the successful strategy can only be written by the governor who sees the future of his or her region for 10 or 15 years ahead. In order not to fall out from the process, in order to contribute to the development of the economic and investment potential of the region, we have to realize the very harmonic and parallel development of business environment and living a real citizen social environment. It's important not to interest investment to bring money to the region. It's important also to create a right climate, or environment in the region that will be very pleasing for living, for working, for investing someone's money and efforts. We have a lot of respondents because we work with ratings of the attractiveness of regions, and the list of respondents is growing every day. We have now in the list about 400,000 entrepreneurs all over the country, more than 10,000 in Moscow, in only in Moscow. It's curious to note that the investment are not only attracted by financial and administrative factors. For them, the environment and region is very important as well. The quality of living there, the infrastructure, the quality of state services provision, because these are the factors that influence the human resource factor, right? And well, the first thing that is about the development of the investment climate of the region, I think it will be correct to say that Moscow made a really breakthrough, well, in relation to the administrative services that are provided for the entrepreneurs, and I mean here some e-services, like for example, approbation of the approval of construction, or like a fastened regime of the, getting the electricity services, the access to the government of Moscow. You can, in a very quick way, get access to someone to talk about some administrative issues, right? And all of this helped Moscow to make this huge step in the rating of the International Industrial Bank, and well, as right now is Moscow is one of the leaders in well, in legislative arena of Russian Federation. Moscow has also a very good reputation in the implementation of roadmaps. We have about 11 of them right now. In 2011, when the agency started this roadmap projects, we already realized that we have quite a big number of legislative restrictions, and for now I can be sure that almost all of them are eliminated, and well, only the application of the law is now important. Well, in terms of this, Moscow has demonstrated quite good dynamics. For the third year in a row, we present the rating of the attractiveness of the region. We present in St. Petersburg Economic Forum, and well, this year Moscow already is in top 10, and it's mostly because there is a very positive dynamics of the region in general. Just like a couple of figures that, from our point of view, are the most important. For today, despite the fact that every region is fighting for the number of days that one needs to spend to get access to electricity supply, for example, the average time is now decreased by 8 days. Moscow has decreased it even more by 10 days. Well, it might seem a minor thing, but this is what business is actually founded on. Sometimes it's about emotion, sometimes it's about relations, but well, more or less, it's some very precise stuff. Registration of, the property rights, Moscow has decreased it by 1/3. Well, we have a very positive results. Moscow has decreased the time that one needs to spend to get access to electricity networks, electricity supply is more or less, it's usually not more than 10 days. And the number of procedures that you have to do, it's not more than 3 or 4 at maximum. Well, this rating of our agency is mostly about the finding of best practices of cooperation with investors, but on the other hand, it's about the growth, points. For Moscow, we need to increase the low share of the state contracts with municipal and regional businesses. This is what we have to work on as well. Talking about the second part here, and about, well, the climate for living, let's call it this way. I believe that Moscow is not an exclusion, especially those of you who live in the center of the city, that Moscow is transforming from the very mad megalopolis into a very cozy city that is very good for living. And in this part, if Michael give me one more minute, yeah, women are always right, so you can take anytime you want. Well, if I may, I could tell you about the new systemic project of the Agency of Strategic Initiatives that is, well, about the best practices, finding best practices. This project starts the 1st of July, exactly today. It's a good time for me to share with you this project. In our work with national rating of the investment attractiveness, we have found a lot of practices that are not economically significant but do influence the social and economic climate in the region as a whole. And well, we asked ourselves a question: how do we collect these practices? Because, well, the problems are mostly the same for every region, but the solutions are everywhere different. And in order not to invent new bicycle, it makes sense to have a look at our neighbor and to find out what are our neighbors doing. And thus, our agency, together with neighbors started developing this mechanism, and this year we start the process of collecting the practices of social economic practices. Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Medvedev, has supported us in the Sochi International Economic Forum. We will already be ready to present our results. So we would like to create the library of best practices in order to choose like 2 or 3 best management solutions that will provide some federal legislative framework to implement on the whole territory of Russian Federation. So I am sure that Moscow has a lot of experience to provide, but also we are very open to the experience of our neighbor. Thank you very much, Dmitry Makarov, Vice Director of the Foundation for the Development of Industrial Sphere.
Thank you, Mikhail. There is a lot of debate recently if industry can, be part of a post-industrial megalopolis as Moscow. And I, as a representative of industry, working in this Foundation for Development of Industry, will try to give you a brief answer. Talking about giants of metallurgical or chemical industry, well, yes, they have no place in Moscow, and the capital, well, maybe is not the best place for them for such heavy industry, which is very huge, very resource intensive. We see, with the foundation, via many applications that we receive, that the industrial policy of Moscow is oriented towards attracting very compact, highly technological projects that provide employment for highly qualified staff. We understand that the city really needs to create such assets where the science meets the industry in such areas as new materials, microelectronics. And recently the projects that we receive in the foundation were projects, as I have already said, in biomedicine technology. And talking about the synergy with the Foundation of Developing the Industry, we understand that in Moscow there is a huge and very powerful infrastructure, the city network of technoparks, technopolis, that really attracts the investors, and we all understand that it is always about funds, you see. And we, the foundation, we offer unique conditions in terms of funding, mutual funding, 5% interest in rubles for 5 years. We look at projects and we understand that growing technological projects are very important. And in the last year, we have funded 4 projects in Moscow. Those are biomedical technology projects, new materials, microelectronics, and 5 projects. Well, those 4 received 1.5 billion rubles, and we understand that extra funds from the investor will amount to about 2.5 billion rubles, and the budget of other categories was received extra 1 billion rubles. For this year, we are planning 5 more projects approved by the board. They were not yet financed. They're being prepared for that. So we are welcoming these kinds of initiatives in projects in Moscow. Thank you. Natalia Bitukova, Federal Corporation of Developing Small and Medium Enterprise. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Talking about the future, it's not by chance that we hear restructuring and support for small business, these words, that they sound in the same sentence. We all understand the one does not happen without the other. Small enterprises know best how to adapt, are the most mobile, they can adapt to the shifting situation. Well, there are certain issues for them, and they face various difficulties, and thus the corporation that was created as an institute of development and functions more than a year by now, one of our main goals is to help small and medium enterprises. There is a network of support, legal support, financial, propriety support, informational and marketing support. And also we help them to hold events, we help them to receive more access to state contracts and state buying. This is a very powerful resource. This is a sales market for the products produced by the small and medium enterprises. And the volume of government state purchasing is enormous, and with the changes in the legislation, now there is an open market for the major companies, Rosneft, Gazprom, and other of our contractors, be that credit institutions. They are now all obliged to publish the list of goods and services that they will later buy from the small and medium enterprises. The corporation has now two-stage system of control that presupposes an assessment of compliance on the federal level and also on the regional level, including a list of contractors and customers, which includes 9 organizations of the city of Moscow. Assessing the volume of purchasing planned by major customers and companies, it's more than 553 billion rubles, and the share of 9 major organizations is about 8%. Well, this is a very significant share. The volume of purchases planned by the organization of the cities of Moscow is about 20%, which corresponds to the federal indices of 26%. And as well, the corporation is very actively doing events to monitor the volumes of the purchases that have already taken place. It's about 443 billion rubles. And we believe that there will be a growth in state purchasing, and we hope to reach 1.3 trillion rubles of purchases from small and medium enterprises by major state agencies. This is one of the measures that we take to give priority to highly technologically intensive measures. We also offer funding and legal support in order to increase the number of manufacturing companies and high-tech companies in our economy and thus change its structure. Dmitry Ivantov, Senior Vice President of the VTB Bank. I will try to be brief. I'm not a futurologist in no way. I'm only urbanist in the sense that more than 20 years I've been working in investment banking with various enterprises of the city communal area. I believe that Moscow, it will be very different in 20 years. It will be transformed, mostly thanks to global trends. Well, Moscow is one of the biggest megapolises, and those trends are inevitable for Moscow. The same processes as will take place in Paris or in London. I don't think that there will be a radical difference between them. Let me give you a clear example from the financial sphere, which I know best. I think now in Moscow, there's around 100, 200 people working in banking sphere. I think that the number in 20 years will decrease by 10 times. because banking office will become an obsolete notion. A banking office where you come to talk to the cashier, to the clerk. This will no longer be taking place. It will all be virtual, all be digital. And all those employments and jobs, they will just, disappear. Yesterday I've been talking to a colleague, and we agree that in 20 years the cashier in the supermarkets, this profession will just disappear. We can now already imagine what technologies could be used to provide a tool that will, read what do you have in your basket, and you will, automatically be charged money from your e-wallet or something like that, and thus hundreds of thousands of employments will disappear. I mean, for cashiers in supermarkets. On the other hand, our VTB bank practice also shows that the employments are growing and appearing in other spheres. In IT, these two letters have been mentioned a lot on this roundtable. We do work intensively with IT. We invest in many companies, in IT companies that create those products that are demanded by the cities and by the residents of Moscow and tourists that help them to increase the quality of their life in this city. A couple of years ago, we've invested in a startup that in only a few years made it possible to sell tickets, sell e-tickets for all public transportation in Moscow. We invested about 80 or 100 million rubles, and this company was very successful, carried out this project successfully, and all the public transportation agencies of Moscow now use their product. And I think that in 5 years all the paper tickets will no longer exist. We'll only be using our smartphones or cards, like, for example, like the Troika card, because this Troika card is very helpful. And I think in 20 years, well, that public transportation itself will be absolutely different, apart from the subway or from buses or trolley buses. Futurologists discussed it at length yesterday. Well, the public transportation will be different. About the VTB bank, how do we, try to make this future happen sooner rather than later? I can say that we feel responsible towards the society, and assessing projects, being partners of the government of Moscow. Well, when you're saying, yes, this certain project will make life better for Muscovites and the guests of the capital. For example, if a project fosters more safety or helps people to use convenient services that right now they don't have, or that a project will make the ecology better, then we, take our financial tools and try to realize those projects. Because you see, in Moscow, traditional credits don't work. You can't, take out a loan. You can't give a small enterprise as much money as they need and then sit and wait when they will give you this money back with interest. It doesn't work that way anymore. Let me give you an example. Our last initiative that we discuss a lot with various structures and departments of the government of Moscow is help for the city companies that are eager to invest in their energetic efficiency. Well, this topic is discussed exhaustively, and we think we've come up with a solution, which is the following: that our daughter company, VTB Factoring, an enterprise that has a program of reducing energy wastes, heat wastes. It has a subcontractor who we trust. The company itself is quite sustainable, with nice credit history. And we say, okay, you want to carry out this project, and we will, the whole amount that you will, we give you the 100% of the money that you really need. And the effect is instant. Everything that everything that is calculated for 5-7 years, I mean the effects of reducing energy consumption, we receive instant results, and we charge quite a modest interest. Our factoring company receives income, and everyone is quite happy. And now we are starting pilot projects with Moscow communal companies in order to test this new innovative project. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I am also sitting at this table, I might have a number of thoughts as well. Brief swap analysis. Moscow today is the center of state administration. I believe it will remain so in 10 years as well. Moscow is science and education center. This will continue as well, just following the economic model of the development of civilization. Entrepreneurial and financial sector. Here I see some challenges. Dmitry has outlined them. Competitiveness and the development of IT will lead to the, to the leak of functionality from Moscow. Our back offices are not in Moscow any longer. They work in Ulyan-Ude, Voronezh, Nizhny Novgorod, and we are trying right now to bring all the other functionality out there, because the wages, they do differ, and this difference makes us make this decision, and IT technologies also make that possible. And this will not be true for banks only, but also about all the headquarters that are here today. Someone will physically move, and we have like an example of Gazprom, and I believe that this part is quite risky and requires some, thinking. And with it, the whole, commercial property market as well. I mean, offices. I don't think that in 20 years everything that is built or will be built will be in demand. The following role of Moscow, as our boss Andrei Kostin said yesterday, wherever money goes, it ends up in Moscow, because Moscow is the biggest, commercial center. The structure of commerce and the technologies of commerce will surely be changing. Already now it's quite obvious that internet commerce is developing quite fast. And another sphere is the personalization of production. 3D printing technologies are developing so fast that there is no doubt that in 30 years we'll be like ordering some, personal items for us, for our apartments, for our life. So in a way, these huge commercial complexes that we are used to today will no longer be there. And I believe that the future will be about some compact industry. I don't know where that will be placed, but I believe that Moscow as a global commercial center is also doubtful. Talking about small businesses, we still will need some barber shops. We will still be needing bars or whatever. This is wonderful small business, and I think that the humanity has a whole set of, some stuff that we need and that we've been needing for thousands of years. We need to, to clean ourselves. We need to, shave. We need to wash our clothes. Well, Maxim, we can forever think forever about the destiny of financial center, but we do compete with our cities. But it's not always about choosing the best. We understand that some decisions are made administratively, and we can understand that. But at the same time, Moscow has been, is, and will surely for some years to go will be the best place for living in the whole map of ex-Soviet Union, and the best place for business as well. So if there won't be any cashiers any longer, Moscow economy won't even notice that, because well, those are not Muscovites who work there. You know, outsourcing some functions to other region. Well, surely that's an option, but key competences are related to key people who will not move from Moscow. I'm sorry, you can move like out of Moscow, somewhere like live somewhere close to Moscow, but you will never leave this city. We do see and understand these risks, but we're not trying to, to guess destruction. We're not trying to keep people here. We're trying to create internal, strong economy that will be competitive, that will be open, and this is the only way to face the challenges that we see right now, to that big number of challenges that we don't see yet right now. So our main goal is to create the competitive economy of Moscow. Thank you. I guess that we managed to, have a look into that vague tomorrow. Urban Forum will stay here for many years to go, and we'll meet again and again and again, and we'll discuss some new tendencies that will help Moscow to remain the biggest megalopolis of our country, the biggest megalopolis of the whole world. Wherever we were born, we are still living in Moscow. Thank you.